I only see my screen?
Who are these people?
Yeah, I'm good.
Who are these people? Hi, everybody. It's Indy, and we're back for another one-on-one, and it's been a couple of months, and I wanted to talk again with my friend Gen X Girl, 1994, over on the X, but of course, we're here everywhere. Hi, Gen X Girl. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Everything is working. We have good audio, just making sure everything's going to work. Excellent, excellent. Okay. So, holy crap, a lot has happened since we last talked. And, you know, we've talked about the research that you do about Israel and their influence on our media, on our Congress, the amount of research that you've done. Just to recap, everyone, we've talked about your work about Beitar US and Ron Tarosian and their influence underneath the Zionists of America and promoting the terrorist group Kahani Kai. That's really bad. that Ben Gvir is a member of, leading pogroms. And we all saw what happened when Ben Gvir came to the United States. He caused a stir in every city that he was in. But Beitar blew up like after you started researching it. It's almost like you shedding light on it really got people paying attention to what was happening. And that's why I wanted to bring you back, is because you do such great research about about what the Israel lobby is up to and how they're trying to influence our narrative and discourse. There's a lot that you've been researching and uncovering since the last time we talked. So I thought it would be important to document some of that. Give you the floor and let you tell us some of the things that you've been seeing, thinking about, what's been frustrating you, and what you've been focused on. So the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, there's been a lot that's happened, right? So kind of picking what to talk about today. And I think that, a couple of the things that I've researched that are probably most important are some of the information that I researched on ADL, that, I think more people would benefit from understanding and looking at, discrepancies and things that they're putting out that are not necessarily, are a great exaggeration of situations. In other cases, I've seen them just, blatant lies that they push out. And as we were talking, before we started recording, just, that there's very little pushback from our lawmakers, anyone really in position of power, mainstream media. Now, social media is completely different. I think, ADL recognizes that people on social media are on to what they're doing. So they're much more savvy and understand what's happening with ADL. But, outside of that, I feel that, they still have, they have a tremendous amount of influence and power in Congress, in the executive branch. They're quoted constantly as if they are, this beacon of truth and civil liberty, but they're completely a shill, organization that specifically has one goal, which is promoting, Israel and the Israeli narrative. And so it's, and every year that passes by, they become more and more extreme in that endeavor. And so I wanted to talk about that. And then if we have time, we could just quickly talk about a little bit about what happened in this last week, because I think that for anyone who is interested in exposing these people who are, more interested in promoting, a Zionist narrative and the state of Israel than they are, working for the federal government, then this last week was probably a great week for that movement, because of characters like Michael Waltz and Mike Lawler, the bill, the anti-boycott bill that he was trying to push that got completely, pushed back by really activism online, and then just some of the fallout from the Waltz firing, and just the story that never ceases to stop giving, because it seems like every day there's a new story about Michael Waltz and his connections to Israel and compromise of government data to the Israeli government, and so on and so forth. So if we have time, we can talk about that, but we can start off with the ADL.
Yeah, let's get to the ADL. And Jonathan Greenblatt has been now. Rafe and Colin on INN News have done a couple of segments about the ADL and about their influence and about their background. We're going to talk about Builders for Tomorrow. I actually read this entire thing over on How Do We Miss That on Sunday night. It's a fascinating story. We're definitely going to get into that. I first want to start with this Morning Joe segment that you mentioned is a good indicator of how Jonathan Greenblatt spins a story to lie. This is a story about Wikipedia, right? So explain what happens here.
So this is where, so ADL published, I think back to back in March on the 19th and 21st, they published two reports. One on the Wikipedia and how there is a hate group narrative, they claim a conglomerate of the editors on Wikipedia are anti-Israel, and then of course they always tag on anti-Jewish, although every example he gives is anti-Israel, bias and narrative. But then he also talks about in this video his second report, which is anti-Jewish and anti-Israel bias in leading large language models, which is AI.
Right.
And the premise of that is what he argues is that, AI, when they're trained on data from, places like Wikipedia. And if Wikipedia has bad data, then AI has bad data. And in this case, the bad data that he's talking about is the quote unquote anti-Israel bias, and that he claims that AI is being trained to be anti-Semitic.
Right. So if Wikipedia is biased, so Wikipedia is Hamas, and therefore everybody that used the AI is Hamas because they're being trained on Wikipedia effectively.
Right.
So let's hear him. Let's hear him bullshit for 4 minutes.
The Anti-Defamation League has found evidence of pervasive anti-Israel and anti-Semitic bias on Wikipedia. The report states that at least 30 editors acted in unison to circumvent Wikipedia's content guidelines, spreading anti-Israel bias following the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas. The report also found that this group of editors were in frequent communication with one another to intentionally spread anti-Semitic narratives and use pro-Hamas phrases on Arabic language pages. Let's bring in right now the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt. Jonathan, as always, thank you so much for being here. Now, we're going to get to in a minute Wikipedia's response because they did respond and ban some of these people. But first, talk about this sort of conspiracy, this online conspiracy to spread anti-Jewish hatred and pro-Hamas propaganda. And focus specifically, if you will,
notice how it
really
became
anti-Jewish all of a sudden. In Arabic-speaking nations where they were just over the top.
Oh, I mean, over the top doesn't begin to state it, Joe. Look, let's just step back and realize Wikipedia is the most visited non-commercial website in the world. 4.4 billion people use it every month. It's bigger than Facebook. It's bigger than Instagram. It's bigger than TikTok. It's literally the default resource for students, for journalists, for ordinary people. And we began to become concerned because we were seeing evidence of bias. So we did what we do at ADL. We decided to kind of lift up the hood and do a data-driven, evidence-based analysis. We literally went back and reviewed thousands and thousands of edits, thousands of messages on the chat logs. And what we found was astonishing. I mean, we think about it as this decentralized, volunteer-led resource. In fact, it's being manipulated by small groups of editors with an ideological agenda. And we found clear evidence, 18 times more likely a small group of people to communicate in their group communications. We found tandem editing, where they coordinate their edits in clear violation of the rules. We found block voting on decisions. And here's why it matters, Joe. These individuals, invisibly, beyond the reach of what most people see, 30 or so people are able to manipulate articles on anti-Semitism, on Israel, on the Middle East, again, in a way that glorifies Hamas, as you said, in a way that plays down terrorism, in a way that literally misinforms the public. But it's
Jonathan,
again, so
give us, it is horrifying this happened. Give us
A
an
lot of
example so
bluster, yeah.
people understand how bad it was.
So take Samir Kuntar, a well-known terrorist who was arrested by Israel after, as a 16-year-old, he was a Lebanese Hezbollah operative who came into Israel, kidnapped a young father and his daughter, drowned the father in front of the daughter in the ocean, and then beat the daughter to death, this 4-year-old girl, with the butt of his rifle, and killed her. He was also involved in the hijack of the Achille Lauro. He had American blood on his hands. If you go to Wikipedia, you think he's a freedom fighter because they've literally sanitized and removed any reference to his terrorist activities. And there are lots of examples of this. And you mentioned this earlier, Joe, the Arabic language Wikipedia. I mean, it's literally like just reading straight up Al Jazeera. Now, that would be okay if they were clear about their biases, but they're not. It is portrayed as objective. And here's why it really matters, Joe. Google relies on Wikipedia for their knowledge panels. OpenAI relies on Wikipedia for ChatGPT. These large language models, these LLMs, are built on Wikipedia. And it is time. ADL has kind of shined a light on this. But we need Congress, we need other watchdogs to see what kind of biases are going on here. We can tell you about the anti-Semitism they're spreading, but I want to know, is there more to this? Because I believe there is. I think the 30 editors that we found are only the tip of the iceberg. We need congressional attention on this. We need more consideration of what's really going on at Wikipedia.
More insanity.
More of everything.
Now wait.
So,
I'm laughing here. Let me stop for 1 second because I want to counter that narrative with one simple fact, which is that we've known for decades that it is not Hamas that edits and manipulates Wikipedia, but rather it is the CIA. So he's screaming that the CIA is Hamas and that the CIA is making edits and block edits. Oh my God, it's CIA. Thank you for telling me, Jonathan Greenblatt. Okay, now you may continue, but I wanted to at least point out that the organization that's most known over decades for editing Wikipedia illegally has been the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. Continue.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much to this. If you can click on that screenshot next to the video, and I'll just, because I just want to take a minute and talk about this video at a couple points in the video, right? I don't know if you noticed how, they start off by introducing the title of the report, but then, very quickly, they go into the examples of, that it's anti-Israel, blah, blah, blah. But notice Joe Scarborough jumping in and saying, anti-Jewish, right? And yet none of the examples that he gave in there or in the ADL report, which, in the interview, he only gave one example, but in the report itself, there is not a single anti-Jewish example. It's all examples of, things that they deem are anti-Israel. But the conflating of anti-Jewish with anti-Israel is that, again, another example where they're using that IHRA umbrella to say they're one and the same, right? And then he goes into Greenblock, segues into, it's like, they're all, they're repeating pro-Hamas narratives. It's like reading Al Jazeera. So there's another attack, right? Because we've been seeing for months now that the pro-Israel side has been trying to broadcast this narrative that Qatar is the bigger issue for the United States and not Israel, right? And so Al Jazeera is a big issue because Al Jazeera is Qatari based, right?
Yep.
And so it's that another, sort of subliminal, well, I don't even call it subliminal, but indirect, jab at, if you read Al Jazeera, you're reading Hezbollah,
Al Jazeera
right?
is actually like a legitimate news organization. I hate to tell you. It doesn't. The fact that they report about what Israel does, honestly, is a problem for Israel because whether it's biased or not. And look, Al Jazeera is going to come from the perspective of the Muslim and Arab world. I hate to say it. So that's how they're seeing this. And if you think that that's propaganda or if that's misinformation, well, maybe there's something wrong with the way that you're presenting yours to them if that's how they're interpreting your information. Maybe.
Well, and also, Al Jazeera, to their credit, has been really at the forefront of exposing a lot of, the narrative that we've been sold. So, but going back to that screenshot, I just want to point out. So he brought up this guy Samir Kuntar as an example. So I actually went and looked at their report to see. So to start off, like the left side is a screenshot of their report. But the report itself, and this is the ADL, who's, they've got graphic designers, on staff. They put these two very fuzzy pictures of screenshots. So it's very hard to read. So I actually went on Wikipedia to double check.
What does it say? Right.
Like he claims that they scrubbed this entry and have made this guy into some hero. I went into Wikipedia to look. First of all, there's no scrubbing. They moved a paragraph down from the top to 2 or 3 paragraphs down, as you can see from my arrow. And that paragraph specifically cites that he was, convicted of murder, and also that the United States has put him on the specialty designated terrorist group. Now, this guy died a few years ago, so he's not even alive. But, this is the example that he's decided to make, right? Is that this is what he's hanging his hat on. But it's very easy to just go and quickly check to see, well, is this true? It's absolutely not true. They're not scrubbing anything. They've simply moved it down. And I looked at some of the other examples that they have cited in there, and it's literally, situations where this conglomerate that they claim is behind this are a group of people that have gone and are coordinating, and you can see the chat logs. I mean, it's all out there available for people to look at, where they're talking about changes. And, in the case of this, where they've added some more context, such as the fact that the guy contested his conviction, the whole time. So they added in there that he's maintained his innocence. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. If that is a public fact, if this guy's important enough to put a Wikipedia page out there for him, and he himself is saying, I contest being convicted. And oh, by the way, I really got curious. So then I started to look even more. And Israeli Record, his psychiatrist, Israeli psychiatrist that was assigned to him all the years he was in prison, said that she believes him, and that there is a lot of evidence that is highly questionable in his case. So there is legitimate.
Well, wait a minute. Stop. There's one other thing. He was eventually released as part of the 2008 Israel-Hezbollah presidency. So he was let out of prison. He's such an evil human being that he did what Jonathan Greenblatt accused him of doing. They let him out? They would exchange him for anything or anyone, considering the heinousness of a crime like that? Now, they couldn't get a conviction, right. So that means they were holding him without conviction for decades, right?
They actually did convict him, but in his court case, because they hung it on the fact that he had confessed. But during his court case, he said that he confessed under duress because he had been beaten up.
Oh, right. He was convicted. Yeah, I see. He was convicted of murder and terrorism, but he maintained his innocence. Yeah, I got it.
He maintained his innocence, right? And then, and it's also very curious because they declassified his entire court case was classified until I think 2 days before they released him in the prisoner exchange. They declassified everything minus the testimony of one individual. The psychiatrist that is on record saying that she believes him said convenient. That there's a lot, that there's a lot to this, and why did they keep that? A lot of the evidence that proves his point was there. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The guy's dead.
All right, so this is again. That's also one of the things that ADL will do is harp on something that doesn't matter for the narrative at all at this point. As an example, right. So wait, where's the Hamas? Where's the Hezbollah? He's attacking right now in 2024, or even since October 7th, that they're so focused on this that they've dumped over $100 million into changing the narrative here and shifting narratives here, right? None of that is what he was able to point to. He pointed to some obscure old thing about a guy who died, about a crime that happened 30, 40 years ago. Like, there's so much to point to between then and now that you could have brought up. Why harp on that one case? That's really kind of weird.
It's a little telling too, because the paragraph that he was harping on, right, and is really, bent out of shape about, not only says that he was convicted and that he was on the terrorist watch list for the U.S., but also has 2 entries in there that was contested that state that Syria under Assad gave him some medal, and that Hezbollah gave him some other medal. Which I looked at the chat logs, and there was a lot of debate going back and forth about the legitimacy of the publications that reported it, and that they were more propaganda, but they decided to include it anyway. But that's not what you hear on MSNBC's Morning Joe. What you hear is, oh my gosh, this terrorist has been turned into a hero. It's ridiculous. So anyway, that got me started into, okay, what the heck is in this report? I started reading the Wikipedia report. And I was like, well, this is crazy. And so I started to see a lot of the narrative. They also have a hyperlink to the sister report, which is the anti-Jewish, anti-Israel bias in leading large language models. So I was like, well, what is this? So I started to look into that, and I realized that, that the entire report argues that, that AI has a learning problem, and that it's being taught to be anti-Semitic, in large part because it's the part of the learning model that they have relies on AI learning off of Wikipedia, and since Wikipedia is pro-Hamas, now AI is training to be pro-Hamas.
Everything's Hamas. So AI is Hamas.
Everything is Hamas. So then, of course, after I read both of them, I'm like, well, this is a heap of garbage. Who helped pull this data for them? There is no way, because they keep talking about how they aggregated large data. They used AI to aggregate the data. And I'm like, all right, I know ADL doesn't have this capability. Who's helped them? And I was specifically looking for an entity called NCRI, which is an Israel-funded group that has produced a lot of reports,
like
claiming anti-Semitism. Yeah, it's similar. And so I thought it was going to be them. So I scroll down to the bottom, and I see that it's this entity called Builders for Tomorrow. And I'm like, well, that's new. I've never heard of these people. So I look, and they'll typically have links. They'll hyperlink their partners. There's no hyperlink. There's no ADL page that describes who these people are. They usually do that. They'll have a whole page dedicated to their partnership. They like to splash and announce things, right?
Sure.
But none of that exists, right? None of it exists. The only thing at the bottom of both reports is this blurb. And it says, and I'll read it to you guys real quick, because it's important, because it's literally the only thing that exists anywhere.
Let me blow
online.
it up. Here we go. That's better.
There we go. All right. So it says Builders for Tomorrow is a venture philanthropy and research organization focused on combating anti-Jewish and anti-West ideologies.
Not anti-Israeli, by the way.
Yeah, anti-Jewish and anti-West. Okay, because remember, keep Project Esther in mind. It is led by industry leaders from the tech community who have built some of the most consequential technology companies. As a venture philanthropy platform, BFT provides grants and accelerates the most promising teams and ideas. Okay, so now they are giving money, right? In terms of research, BFT leverages cutting-edge advances in generative AI and large language models to address pressing global challenges. The group conducts research across 3 core areas: combating misinformation online, identifying bad actors engaged in criminal activities, and helping to scale the most promising emerging news and social media accounts that shape public discourse.
That's psycho talk.
That's a lot.
That's psycho
right?
talk.
That is a lot of power, right?
First of
a
all,
lot of money.
I want to ask, first of all, they're providing grants and accelerating teams and ideas. Where are they providing grants to? Because none of that is any public data. There's no knowledge. And go ahead. I'm jumping ahead of you because you did all the work. So go ahead. I'm pulling the curtain back.
No, I mean, that's exactly it. Okay, so if you're a grant, you issue grants and accelerate teams and ideas. Where are you doing it?
Where
right?
would I
There's
go
gotta
to
be
apply for a
website
grant?
somewhere. Yeah, where do you go? Where do you find this stuff, right? So, and then, where is the information that you publish under your research? Where is the misinformation online, data that you're publishing? Can't find that. Where do you identify, when you identify bad actors engaged in criminal activity, where are these reports? And let's start off with, what's your definition of bad actors and what criminal activity? And who are you working for? Who's asking for this data? Because this seems like police, FBI. So why are you some philanthropy group doing the work of what is law enforcement? And then on the third, which was the most eye-raising for me in terms of narrative manipulation, is so you're claiming that you are boosting news, emerging news, and social media accounts, and you you give out grants and money. And so now you're starting to sound a lot like Israel's propaganda plan that they announced at the beginning of this year, right? That they were going to boost social media accounts. They were going to boost news outlets that were pro-Israel.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Who are these people? Yeah,
Oh, wow.
who are these people?
Oh, now I have to clip that.
Who are these people?
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Yeah.
Yes, that's our thing. Who are these people?
I love the beginning of that. Who are these people?
Who are these people?
Yeah, so
there's Jimmy Dore.
So I spent, I think, 5 hours. I woke up early one morning and I just started going down this rabbit hole, and I was digging and digging and digging, and I could not find anything. That they do not exist. They do not have a digital footprint. They are a figment of ADL's imagination.
So this is what you get at Corporation Wiki. All right. This is, I'm guessing, where you started, that you found this website. All right. And it turns out that they are registered. There's a Builders for Tomorrow, Inc. All right. That's a nonprofit out of New York that was registered in 1962 and has zero filings and has never registered or done a thing since 1962. Yeah. But they've been active.
Well, not only that. Yeah, and you cannot find. So this is the corporate wiki, but I actually went into the state of New York and I looked in there because they have more data. No officers listed, no address listed, no telephone. The link to the website leads you right back to the state of New York's registration page.
Even
they
Grok,
do not exist, right?
And we know Grok doesn't give you information. Here's the state registration info that you grabbed. All right, to show again, you've got, and that it was updated just last week.
And yet nothing that can point to who is behind this.
Right.
No website, like I said, no websites exist anywhere, no addresses, no phone numbers. There is an entity that there's a couple of different entities that are called Builders for Tomorrow.
Yes.
But they're, community based, right? So they do community based projects like building a playground or, stuff like that.
Yeah,
totally
housing the homeless.
These people,
yep,
yes,
I saw that. And there was like builders with tomorrow or builders around tomorrow. So it's close, but or building. I think it's building for tomorrow. So it sounds like
building for tomorrow.
But it's not the same, but it comes up when you search. So it buries anything that might be referencing this, although there's nothing referencing this. Now, my big question is industry leaders from the tech community. First of all, Jonathan Greenblatt could consider himself one of those because he monitors social media. But the other one that jumps out off the page at me that would be behind something like this, potentially, if it's not CIA, which very well could be, and Mossad, maybe even a joint operation, would be Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman is a guy that would absolutely be 100% behind a research organization like this, completely shadowy, completely not disclosing anything, all right, but heavily and highly involved, influential, and funded.
Right,
Okay.
right. And then there's also that guy, what's his name? Schmidt from Google.
Eric
What's his
Schmidt.
name?
He's more
Eric
aligned
Schmidt.
with the Democrats, I think. Yeah, he's a tech mogul, but he's been too public to really pull something off like this behind the scenes, I feel like.
Well, the only reason I say that is because Google has, LLMs. They do
Yes.
large language models. They
Gemini.
also do, they also do regenerative AI. If you remember from our talk about Eric Adams and that whole conglomerate that was behind the WhatsApp group chat,
Yep.
do you remember that?
Sure.
That went after the university. Eric Schmidt was one of those people.
So was Bill Ackman.
And so was Bill Ackman. But there's also, so it could be a myriad of people. And it seems like it's not just one, one company or one,
It could be the people in that
industry
chat.
Leaders.
Consider
Yes,
themselves
leaders.
builders for tomorrow. And they're using this cutout that one of them registered when they were a kid or whatever that never did anything. That was designed solely for this purpose, which is really weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, what link that the 1962 company has to these people, but if there is, then I have to assume that that entity is probably affiliated more with the state of Israel, and they're using it as a shell. But at this point, I'm not convinced that those people are affiliated with this group. But I do know enough to know that when he's using a plural term, leaders, industry leaders,
That's more than one.
there's a lot of tech industry leaders that were in that WhatsApp group chat. As a matter of fact, there was over 100 people, millionaires and billionaires, who were industry titans. And I remember the New York Times report literally called it titans of industry, that were coordinating to go after student protesters. So there has to be some collaboration, and a bunch of these people are most likely from those group chats involved in this type of thing, because they run in these same circles. You look at different reports, you start to see the same names, like you were saying, Bill Ackman's name starts to pop up in a lot of these things. Eric Schmidt does too. He just keeps a lower profile than Bill Ackman.
Sure.
He's not, on social media screeching like Bill Ackman does all the time.
Well, no, he worked with the Biden White House. He also is a defense contractor. He has consulting companies. He was basically going to be the Peter Thiel type figure that would have overseen all the technology of the Kamala Harris administration. Very involved with California Democrats, right? Which we know are nothing, not even liberal. They're like conservadems,
Yep.
Because there are no Republicans in California effectively that have any power. So you have to be a Democrat, even if you are a conservative. It's literally a dino, but he's pro-surveillance, pro-Zionist, pro-censorship, and against universal health care. I mean, again, that tracks with the Democratic Party right now, but not with the base of the Democrats. That's not what the base wants.
Right, exactly. And then when you look at, the fact that ADL is also part of the Democratic Party conglomerate, right? Although they, since, are trying to quietly, right, align with themselves with either party. They're trying to play that whole APAC, it doesn't matter which side.
Right.
But they are very much in aligned with the DNC. In terms of what they pushed. If you look at ADL reports, you look at the entire white supremacy that emerged in terms of domestic terrorism, going after white supremacists after J6, all of that. It came out of ADL. ADL was literally leading that charge, and has on one of the threads I did, I have a report that shows that they dedicate significant amount of their budget requests that they do. They do this budget request to the federal government every year, where they advocate for programs that they support. And the one that I did the thread on was a $1.1 billion budget request for a myriad of, ADL backed programs. And there was a significant portion of it dedicated to, white supremacy. If you peel the layers, the definition of their white supremacy was a little, even at that time was shady. And this is a couple years ago. The latest ADL report that just came out for 2024, the white supremacist section that they include, 75% of their findings in that section are anti-Israel or anti-Zionist, what they deem propaganda. And it's literally examples of, Zionists, are controlling our government. Zionists are, doing things in behalf of Israel, this and that. So that is now, their definition of what is a white supremacist. And if you tie it back to the reports that they've generated in the past in their budget requests, they now link that to domestic terrorism.
Oh yeah.
And so it's a complete, so my point is that, a lot of this, they do lean into, I never want to call it leaning into the left because they're not the left. They are the DNC. They lean, the ADL very much leans into the DNC, which then if you consider an Eric Schmidt or even a Bill Ackman, who until recently was DNC, it really aligns and tracks, that it is that same group, because as I'm sure you've noticed, there is a inter-Zionist war going on right now between the right and the left side of Zionism right now, between, the faction that aligns with ADL versus the faction that aligns with entities like Batar. And
yeah, all of them want to kill Palestinians. They're solidly all on that side. But just how much they tell people, how much they lie to people about it, and exactly the way they decide to go about it and who they align with while they do it are really the only things that they're arguing about.
It really is. It's having splitting hairs over, how do you present the narrative? ADL's faction is upset that, the Batar faction is really showing the true face of Israeli Zionism, that they are very much bloodthirsty. They are very much, hell-bent on committing genocide, and they're proud of it. ADL would prefer that everyone believe, that they're the victims and that, and that it's not them, it's everybody else that's a savage. And so, so there's that battle going on, but you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they completely agree on getting rid of the Palestinians, whether it's through death or ethnic cleansing. It's just how you present that, right, is where they're having this battle. So anyway, going back to this, to segueing into the ADL report, and let me just wrap up really quick on the Builders for Tomorrow.
Yeah, Builders for Tomorrow, because it's still crazy what's going on. That they claim that they're influencing generative AI, which it's not, again, because the CIA is the one that is manipulating Wikipedia. So if it's going into generative AI, guess what? It's CIA narratives that are being pushed in there. So if the ADL is screaming with their hair on fire about Wikipedia edits and they claim that it's from XYZ, well, CIA is pretty good at masking IP addresses if they want to. They certainly in the past made it look like actions have happened from Russia or Ukraine when they've actually happened from Langley, and we've seen that proven out over time. All right. But what I feel like this organization, BFT, is a shadow mask for the ADL. It's just them putting something out with a organization that they're giving credibility to, that nobody can discredit, so therefore it must be credible, right? And it's not the ADL themselves putting it out. So now they're using a third party potentially in the minds of how they're selling this and how they're spinning this. All right. So that, well, it's not us, it's Builders for Tomorrow. But who is Builders for Tomorrow? That it's really you. It's you. All right. Whether it's you're paying somebody or somebody you're connected to or affiliated with, but you're co-producing it with them. It's you. I don't think that
Yeah.
there's really much mystery to that, and the fact that they won't disclose anything about who they're connected to is so shady to me that it either screams that private WhatsApp group and or intelligence or both, or some kind of overlap or combination of both, because otherwise they would go out of their way to be transparent, to be able to validate the data that's in these reports.
Right. I mean, why not explain who these people are, right? I mean, what is the purpose of keeping them, behind this this cloak of builders for tomorrow?
Yes, a
Yeah, this
firewall.
firewall,
So
And
that their
so, yeah, so a
biases
lot of
can't be
questionable-
exposed. It's so that their biases can't be exposed.
Right. And then also, it takes me back to, why even, what got them into focusing on this. Now, ADL's been making a lot of big moves in terms of, initiatives to get ahead of, the narrative or shaping narrative, right?
Yes.
And so this falls right in line with that. I don't know if you remember that that testimony that Jonathan Greenblatt gave at the Knesset a couple months ago, where he was talking about, well, maybe the Knesset should create an Unit 8300 to fight this battle. I don't know if you saw that, but
No.
he was basically, so he was basically trying to tell the Knesset that the way that they're doing things is not working, and that they need to prioritize the battle against the narrative at the same level that they have prioritized the actual, bombing of Gaza and bombing everybody around them, right? And so, put the narrative battle on par with the tactical military battle. And so what he was saying was that, we need the genius that brought the pagers, the Hezbollah pagers. We need that kind of genius to fight this narrative battle. So he was just going on and on about all of this. He's, there's like a J7 he's created across, all these big, Zionist organizations that are collaborating across the Western countries and all this kind of stuff. So my point is that, he's looking big picture. He's looking, future facing of how do we control this narrative? How do we make sure that ultimately the BDS movement does not become, successful, although it is successful, but successful in completely, doing damage to the Israeli economy and following that same model as South Africa or apartheid South Africa.
Right.
And so it falls in line with that, those goals that he would be pursuing and his organization would be pursuing in align with whoever these people are, to then, start to get, control of how AI is trained, getting Congress to pass legislation to, to control Wikipedia and what information is, available on Wikipedia, and then thereby also controlling how AI through Wikipedia and also other, learning models that they use, controlling what AI ultimately is trained on knowing, because AI is only as good as what it's, the information that is trained on and the information that it has access to. And so that's the goal there in terms of online. If you look at it and you draw some parallels, that's one track. Another track that they're doing is ADL has also launched a hedge fund, and it's called J-Lens. They actually created that a couple years ago, but they just launched their J-Lens fund, which is called Tove. And the marketing around that is to how do they market it? To support pro-Israel, and of course they tag on pro-Jewish, but they really are focused on the Israel part. Pro-Israel corporations that support Israel by buying into that fund, because that fund only buys, stock in pro-Israel companies. And then their advertisement literally says advocate for Israel in the boardroom. Well, let's kind of unpack that. And if you unpack that and kind of step back a couple of, maybe about a year, I don't know if you remember that entity called GERM, GERM. They were that entity that the ADL headed that basically controlled advertisers from advertising on platforms that the ADL felt was not censoring enough about
Like
Israel.
Rumble.
Yep. And so they would literally that germ organization would initiate these advertising boycotts on platforms to hurt them financially, so that then they would comply.
I've seen some other things. I've seen some other things, like what they also do is they'll go in and file copyright takedown request claims on videos that are inconvenient to their narrative, which then initiates a process where the platform is obligated to take it down, send a letter to the creator, and then the creator has to then prove that they had the rights to say that or to post that material. And if they don't, it stays permanently down.
Right. Well, I totally believe that, right? Because it's really about, creating that hiccup, that, roadblock to whether, even if ultimately it gets allowed to be put back on the platform. Well, you just bought 6 to 8 months, right? And that's really the goal, is
no, it's
to
10
just make it
days.
painful.
They have to respond within 10 days, providing evidence, and then it can be restored if it's proven that there was rights there, and and not only that, but then you could technically sue the person that tried to take it down, but they're entities that don't exist. Good luck suing BFT, for example.
Right. Yeah. So GERM, speaking of entities that don't exist, so GERM was, went after X after Musk bought X.
Yes.
And if you remember the advertisement boycott that was happening on X, well, it was led by GERM. And there was a big fight between Musk and GERM and the ADL. And what they did is, when it was Twitter, they were part of GERM. When Musk, bought X, then X was no longer part of GERM. They launched the advertising boycott, and all of that stuff got ugly. Then ultimately, as a sort of, negotiated, settlement of let's stop the fight and get the advertisers back, X joined GERM. And they actually did an announcement that they were going to be, part of this, whatever. And it was interesting because
basically they bent the knee and said they would comply.
Yeah. So here's what happened, which was really interesting. X joined GERM for about 2 months, I think. And then Musk filed a lawsuit against GERM. And the lawsuit said that they were colluding against X using this entity, GERM, to boycott, do the advertiser boycotts. And they were basically pressuring advertisers through GERM to not advertise. And so the whole lawsuit was based on collusion.
Sounds like BDS to me in a way.
Yeah.
In a way.
And so, in a way, but it was different. Okay. So BDS is individuals, right? Like I can choose to boycott something, but no one is pressuring me to do it. This was different. This was a
third party entity with power. A third party entity with power behind it. Yep.
Well, and they would pressure on two fronts. They would pressure, platforms and label them anti-Semitic, but they would also pressure advertisers and label them anti-Semitic if they chose not to, toe the line.
Sure.
Because, GERM was the authority on what's anti-Semitic. And if the advertiser said, screw you, I'm still going to advertise. Well, now they were an anti-Semitic entity. So it went on both fronts, right?
Everybody's Hamas. Everybody's Hamas.
Everybody's Hamas. Yeah. So then, he filed the lawsuit. And guess what happened right as soon as he filed the lawsuit? Germ disband.
Wow.
They no longer exist. And I read a bunch of articles about it. And they said that, the argument that they made was that Germ does not have the money to fight the lawsuit, blah, blah. But in reality, the reason they disband is because they didn't want to go through discovery. Because if they went through discovery, a lot would be revealed. So Germ is gone. So now ADL doesn't have a mechanism through which it can, pressure and gang press, platforms to do its bidding. So now Tove is launched. And you go from manipulating and pressuring and, pressuring entities to censor through advertisement boycotts. Now you've moved to a model where you're going to do the same through stock prices. So we're not talking a little bit of money. Tove touts that they have raised something like $500 million that they are using to buy stock in Israel, pro-Israel companies. As a matter of fact, they launched a campaign encouraging people to buy Tove and invest in X. Sorry, not X. What's his car company? Tesla. So to buy Tesla stock through Tove. And so when you look at it and you look at their advertisement and where they talk about, controlling or influencing pro-Israel support through the boardroom. Well, if you're a big enough shareholder, you now start to, get a seat in the boardroom. Yep. And so I think that is literally where they're pivoting there. And again, that is an effort long-term to combat the BDS effort, because companies are starting to feel the pressure, and they literally advertise this, that companies are feeling the pressure from activism to divest or, from Israel.
McDonald's and Starbucks certainly are.
Yeah.
You also mentioned social media platforms. Look at what the ADL did to TikTok in the last year and a half. The attacks that they've had on them, and it was specifically because of the amount of hashtag Free Palestine posts that were against the hashtag I'm Israel Chai posts. It was 10-1, and it was continually measured that way. And they were claiming it was being, done. To me, that was the only platform they couldn't influence and regulate. And they were even still influencing and regulating it. Everything was going through Oracle servers. We still had access to all of that. There were, former CIA and intelligence agents that worked for TikTok, for ByteDance. And I believe they ended up, did they sell? I don't remember what happened in the end, but it's coming to a point where it's a decision has to be made. They either have to sell it or they have to shut it down.
Yeah, they extended it. So they did a 60-day extension, and then that expired. And now they've extended it again. I don't know for how long, but they've extended it again.
Right. What they're doing is they're trying to allow for negotiations to happen and force this company to sell itself to either, I know Rumble is part of a conglomerate and X has offered to buy it. I heard Amazon was involved in buying TikTok potentially. There was a talk of Meta looking at buying them. There were a lot of, U.S. global conglomerates that were interested in possibly buying that. I think they were still trying to suss all of that out, but that's still coming. I mean, it's already kind of happened where the TikTok control was already handed over. I remember there was a date. It was like April 17th or something like that, when there was a switch that was flipped. And effectively, it was like the CIA starting to control the narrative. That's when everybody started to go over to Red Note, right? The Chinese app that mirrors TikTok. And again, that's another place that allegedly Israel narrative can't influence. But I found out that one of their board members actually is a big pro-Israel billionaire, of course. Because they are a private company as well, by the ones that own Red Note. But yeah, I mean, it's just everywhere they go trying to influence the narrative and stay one step ahead of the decision makers so that they can stay in control and ahead of the people that are trying to combat the death, the destruction, and the whitewashing of the murdering that they are doing on a daily basis for the last 20 months, continuing unabated. And now they're talking about completely leveling and ethnically cleansing and taking over Gaza 100%. What are they going to do with the people who are there? They still haven't answered that question. You know, they've talked about Somaliland, and moving them off to that. Colin and Reef covered that about 2 weeks ago on INN News. Check that out. There's a clip on the INN channel on YouTube about it. Crazy. And again, Trump continues this to endorse this rhetoric. Now, something's happened in the last couple of days where they're playing the game of Trump's not going to Israel, and Trump made a deal with Yemen that said that they could still bomb Israel. We all know where the money's still coming from. We all know that there's still tremendous support for Israel here, and it's unfortunate because we should abandon it. There are 3 or 4 Congress people standing up, principled ones that I don't like or agree with ever, but they happen to be saying the right thing here. You know, 2 of them would be Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie. Both of them, and allegedly Thomas Massie also takes Israel lobby money through other cutouts, as does Greene. And Greene even tried to pull some crap about Ukraine. We don't want to give money to Ukraine or to fight this, but never said anything about the Palestinian people, which was a little bit weird.
I mean, I mean, and it's very strange too, because, you know, it's never more apparent how disconnected our lawmakers are, from voters than it is on this subject, because polling after polling keeps coming out, and every poll that comes out, it shows that, disapproval of Israel has grown even more. We are now, confidently in the majority for disapproval. It's over 50%. I've seen 53%, 54%, who disapprove Israel. Any other country, and, the narrative in Congress would have changed by now, but they're holding strong, as if it just doesn't exist. As a matter of fact,
bipartisan basis. Again, Lawler and Lindsey Graham on the Republican side. Okay, you've got Fetterman and Cory Booker, who hosted and invited Ben Gvir, and Smotrich is being invited to the White House. It really is a bipartisan thing, because they fought both sides of the argument, allegedly. Because they're not even allowing for the, hey, maybe we shouldn't be murdering civilians and allowing for a land grab and a theft. That's not even in the conversation anymore.
I mean, it's not. And we've moved into this realm where, at least, on the Republican side, what I call, pretend mega, but they're actual rhinos, they're actual, establishment Republicans that jumped on the mega bandwagon just because the wave was there and they had to write it out. But they're now changing the narrative, even where, statements like "stop the genocide in Gaza" they're claiming is anti-Semitic. As a matter of fact, the GOP chairwoman, her name is Lisa McClain, she's holding anti-Semitism hearings again for the 20th time in the House against Harvard this morning. And I literally saw a clip of her that I posted this morning where she's on Newsmax talking about, how, the anti-Semitism and the attacks on Jewish people need to stop. Well, the clip that Newsmax, plays while she's giving her little speech is literally this reel that's on repeat. Yep, right there. That is, and I don't know who did that, if it was by accident or somebody in their control room, who had a heart, putting that on repeat, showing that you're talking about a bunch of kids standing around holding a sign that says, stop the genocide in Gaza. And you're saying this is anti-Semitic and you're going to get punished
And they're
because quote
violent.
unquote, you're not following. Yeah. And you're not following the rules. She literally says that.
Oh my God. All right, let's watch this.
It's insane.
Federal dollars is a privilege, not a right. These are dollars from hard-working American people that don't believe in anti-Semitism, that believe that universities that don't follow the law, that don't want to be transparent, shouldn't receive those dollars. So here's what I say. One, you should be saying thank you for the receiving the dollars and understanding that they're a privilege. And you know what? If you don't want to follow the rules of receiving, and that's fine, but we also have a right too. So if you have a right to do whatever the heck you want to do, we also have a right too. But notice how they kick and scream and they file lawsuits and they whine like little babies when they don't get their millions of dollars. It's really simple. Follow the rules. You have a choice, but guess what? We have a choice too. Receiving.
Oh my God, that's so psychotic.
Who is we?
Dude, honestly,
No, but who is?
We as the U.S. government.
I was gonna ask.
We as the U.S. government, all right, but there are rules. There were rules. They've now changed those rules mid-game and expected everybody to retroactively follow those rules. Wait, what?
Right.
It's literally psychotic type of behavior. All right. And then you're gaslighting and saying that, we're not going to give you this money if you don't follow the law. What law are they not following again? What rule are they not following? The rule now is, that you can't criticize Israel. Again, they changed the rules mid-game and now expect you to retroactively and moving forward not contest the rule change. No, that's not going to happen. And then they turn around and said, they're filing lawsuits and crying. Isn't that exactly what the Israel lobby does? Like the biggest projecting gaslight you can imagine right there. My word. Get that face off my screen.
Well, and exactly. It's infuriating. But if you kind of step back and think about her statement, we can also do this. Who is we? You're an elected representative. You are supposed to represent we, the people.
From Michigan.
We, the people. Yeah, exactly. And we, the people, from poll after poll after poll, are telling you we do not support Israel. So who is we? Define we, because we is not the American people, majority of American people. We is literally Congress, the executive branch, and your lobbyists and donors, because it's not we, the people. So they need to be very clear about who we are, because at this point, I don't know what else, can be can get published that shows that there is a huge gap between where we, the people, stand and where our government stands. Oh, and by the way, apparently all these human rights groups are anti-Semitic.
Yeah, all these groups are anti-Semitic. It's not really 100% clear on here, but Amnesty UK is blatantly anti-Semitic because they found that Israel is an apartheid state. I guess she's never been to Gaza. Human Rights Watch has shown that they have an anti-Israel agenda. Even the Human Rights Council, which includes China and Russia, is considering investigating Israel. Of course, they don't want to investigate Navalny because he's a CIA agent, or the Uyghur Muslims because that was a CIA talking point. Okay, so she's, let me guess that she once came from the CIA. That's my guess, is that she was on an intelligence community or committee, or that she's directly from the CIA. And we have several ex-CIA agents already in Congress, like Spanberger. She's gone, I think, now.
She's running for governor.
Alyssa Slotkin, she used to be CIA affiliated, I believe. There are several of them. I know that there's a lady from New Jersey. She's an ex-pilot that there's questions about her CIA connections. Mikey Sherrill. There's a bunch. And I think there's more than we believe or that we know of. But yeah, she's insane. Again.
Yeah, she is.
Criticizing Israel
hearings
is
today.
anti-Semitic. Yes, that is what it's boiled down to, with the legislation that failed over the weekend, with the Stopped Anti-Semitism Hate Act that they tried to railroad through Congress last December. All right, that they then tried to reignite in January. Go ahead.
I have an update for you on that. So I don't know if you saw it, but they brought, so you know how they submit 2 copies, right? One in the House, one in the Senate, but they're identical. And they do that on purpose so that if it passes one House, there's no reconciliation issue and they can just move it on, right? Okay. So the Senate, it was in committee in the Senate and it was going to get voted on. I believe it was last week, either last week or the week before. Anyhow, Bernie Sanders and there was one other person, and I'm going to forget his name, but anyway, they just pulled the most brilliant thing. They introduced, I think it was 7, either 5 or 7 amendments to the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act that literally cut the legs off of it being used to go after people who criticize Israel. And the day that they introduced those amendments, a bunch of the Republican members of the committee were not in chamber. And they did something, they finagled something with the rules where they only allowed 2 hours for anybody to contest
To offer
the
amendments, right.
To offer amendments, to come up and critique the amendments, to give their whatever. It was just a 2-hour period, and then they had to vote. So the chair of that committee is called the Help Committee. He was running around trying to find his members to show up into the committee so they could vote on this and vote it down. He couldn't get enough of them. So this gang of 11, which included all the Democrats, plus Rand Paul, and at least on 2 of the amendments, also, what's that woman's name? The old woman from Maine, Senator Republican? Not Lisa Murkowski, that's Alaska, but the other
she's
one
Alaska.
that's old like her.
Yeah. I can't.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Not Shaheen.
Not Shaheen, but the other one with the glasses, dark hair.
Susan Collins.
That's it, Susan Collins. So Susan Collins on 2 out of the 5, I believe, and then Rand Paul on all of them, along with the 11 or 9 or whatever all the Democrat members were, and they had the majority. So they passed all of the amendments, and the amendments were literally things like, you cannot use this to go after people protesting Israel. You cannot do this if people are voice their opinions about, what's happening in Gaza. You cannot use this to do, it was literally like, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do this. And they kept citing the First Amendment, saying that this is a violation of First Amendment. So they all passed.
Wow.
And let me tell you, the pro-Israel lobby was like on fire. And I wish I was in the halls of Congress to see the chairman of the Health Committee, along with his AIPAC buddies, running around frantic people trying to find their members to come vote. But the whole thing, yeah. So it was great. It was brilliant, very savvy, a political moment for Bernie and gang.
Well, while they're still whitewashing support for the bombing of, sending defensive weapons to Israel, whatever the fuck that means. Nonsense. Great. So he delayed it for 38 seconds. Thanks, Bernie. I am not a fan of Mr. Sanders at all. I feel still very badly taken and lied to by him. I don't like what he's doing, going around the country and having rallies that allegedly promote, the fighting the billionaire class while not saying the word genocide, while not acknowledging Palestine, while not doing anything other than fundraising. That's what this is. It's a fundraising tour because he doesn't want to, I can't with this guy anymore. It's beyond disappointing that, and again, he can claim that Netanyahu is whatever, but it's not Netanyahu, it's Israel. It's Israel. It's not just one person who's the psychopath. It's their entire Knesset. It's what they have voted to do. It's now Smotrich. It's their heads of all their intelligence agencies. They've just had turnover with everybody, so I don't know who the new people are. But allegedly, they're even more hardline and psychopathic than the ones that were there before. That's not good. That's not good.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I will say, I will take the tiny inches that we get because it is such an upward battle. And so the fact that these things are even happening now, I think is a positive sign, that we need to continue the pressure and that we will get there. It's just very frustrating, to your point, that this hasn't happened already and this isn't happening faster, right?
Well, I think the worldwide,
the
global pressure also is making a big impact. And it's not even necessarily, they don't listen to our citizens. Our citizens have no impact. Where it's having impact is the bucks. All right. That's all they listen to is their fucking money anymore. So now you've got multinational corporations. Now their stocks are starting to get really affected by this. BDS messes with people. So, well, then we'll just invest in defense contractors and surveillance companies like Marjorie Taylor Greene buying into Palantir, which had the best Q1 of any corporation in the stock market. Okay. That's what you end up seeing is they start shifting their dollars into the organizations that will support, suppressing Palestinian voices. And again, like you're talking about with this hedge fund promoting companies and investing in companies that promote the genocidal intentions of Israel.
Yeah.
So
we'll see, but I do, I don't think that we would have seen, about 2 years ago, some of the stuff that's happening now, I would have probably, if you asked me, I would have never guessed that they would have happened,
Again, Israel committing the kind of murders they've committed daily and having it live streamed to our phones every day for 2 years with the U.S. not stopping it and continuing to send the weapons. There is a massive disconnect between and now the other thing is, as I've said, there's a lot of people that if they're not on Twitter, they're not seeing this because no other platform is really allowing. Instagram a little bit. I don't see it on my Facebook feed at all. I'm on Facebook. I don't really even see it on a Blue Sky feed much, though it's a little bit there. Nobody's on Blue Sky. It's a wasteland of nobody. Substack, it's certainly on Notes. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Truth Social is similar. I mean, it's
it
seems like nobody's on there but bots,
Yeah, that they're echo chambers and bot farms, but Substack Notes, you can curate your own feed, so you can choose to see what you want to see or not. So I would guess that the pro-Israel people are just muting or hiding anything that is showing anything that Israel is actually doing. The starvation of children and looking at all of these emaciated photos of kids that haven't eaten in 2 months because Israel continues to blockade any aid going in from anybody. Not just that they're responsible for providing aid themselves because they've completely walled these people in, but they're also blocking anybody else from potentially getting there. And there was a story this week, I mentioned it briefly. I got questions even over this whole flotilla thing. They've tried this a couple of times. I thought it was every time I think it's a mistake. It's sad, but Israel's never going to allow that to successfully happen when they block trucks and everything else. So it's literally just inviting them to attack a ship and to create a narrative where they're attacking a ship that's trying to bring aid. Now, my other question is, have they been constantly following Greta Thunberg around because they sunk that ship and allegedly she was on her way to get on that ship? And there was narrative that they saw she was heading there and they didn't want to sink it with her on it because that could have been potentially a much bigger story. So they did it with her on the way to the ship. But that means that they're tracking her movements. They're tracking her cell phones or somebody around her, or, and I don't want to say the worst, the other thing that I'm speculating, but I have speculated that she's been invited to a lot of places that Zionists have hung out. She's done the pro-Palestine narrative, 100%. She's been pro-Palestine. All right. They need somebody out there to say that, but she is still one of the most prominent public pro-Palestine activists who has no power, right? In reality, she doesn't run a company. She's a she's a mascot. She's a representation. So for her to do that, while it's inconvenient to them, it also helps to serve a purpose in a way. And I don't think that they necessarily, that they're 100% opposed to people that are out there opposed to them. They need opposition so they can play the victim, right?
Yeah, I mean,
remember,
I don't know.
They like to buy all sides of the argument. This girl has been in the public spotlight since she was a teenager. She was elevated to a level that nobody else had been globally. I got questions, while she, again, is a vocal champion on behalf of freeing Palestine and saying, again, we have to look at media, that nothing that we see in corporate media that is pushed isn't controlled. We have to think about it that way, because it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just something to think about. But, again, this is all designed, everything that you're talking about, all this research is designed to whitewash a narrative that Israel is stealing the land and the resources from the people who inhabited that land for decades. All right. They've already squeezed them the way that the U.S. has squeezed the Native American population here into smaller and smaller and smaller locations as they take more and more and more of the land. We had reported a couple of weeks ago that Israel just moved the line in on Gaza, like a mile and a quarter, the entire length of the fence that borders Gaza initially. So they were literally just little by little taking the land. And now they've announced, well, no, we're just going to take it all down. So
yeah,
that's where we are now, that they've now pulled the mask completely off and said, yeah, we're going to ethically cleanse them. We're going to do this. Again, we said this over a year ago, plus we knew that this was the plan. They never really had any intent to get the rest of the hostages back. They've been using that as an excuse and as a shield to commit further murders against people that are running for their lives and living in tents. And then they call them terrorists. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen, really. And people ask me, like, why are you so angry? I ask them, why aren't you? What's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't understand how people can be so passive about it. It's because it's not happening to them and it's not happening around them. And they're being kind of pushed around so much with the rest of life that they don't really have the time to pay attention to it. It's painful and they don't want to pay attention to it. And they have to fight against the people that make their lives nice and comfortable. So they don't want to do it that way either. I think that's kind of what's happening here. It's a complete denial of reality. And what's going to happen if and when reality actually does slap everyone in the face is what I'm wondering. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, what will happen. I feel like the next, year and a half going into the 2026 election is going to be interesting. For me, I feel like it's a moment for us in America to decide whether we're actually going to attempt to take back control for our own country, or are we going to just, continue to capitulate, continue to just, allow the narrative to manipulate us? Because to your point, if you look at these DNC rallies that they're using as, the resistance or whatever the hell, what are they saying? What is different about what they're saying than before the 2024 elections?
It's just Trump's a fascist.
You know,
Trump's a fascist.
yeah, yeah. But, you know, that's what Kamala Harris ran on, right? Is that the orange menace is enough for people to not want to vote, you know, for him. And they were wrong. It's not, you know?
Got to give some
And so
people
they're
something to
doing
vote
the
for.
same.
You got, first of all, it's got to be
Yes.
different. All right. And I can't stand the person that I'm quoting, but when given the choice between Republican light and Republican, people will choose the Republican every time.
Yeah. And so here's the thing, okay, is that there's so much wrong with that, right? With that, with the way that these, you know, ninnies and these idiots and, you know, and they're all bought left, right. I don't care which side you're on. You have to acknowledge that they are completely compromised people whose only purpose in life is to promote themselves. They could care less. Maybe a handful actually care, but the rest don't, right? And so you're just in the machine grinding away and doing things that to advance yourself. And so you're going to toe the line regardless. And despite the fact that all the data points at, if you start to take a position on certain things that align with voters, you will most likely not only win, but win by a landslide. The fear of what the lobby will do to you keeps them from making that move. And
They
so
just
it's
saw
cowardice.
They just saw it in Bowman
They
and
just saw
Bush.
it.
They literally saw what happened at Bowman and Bush. They saw the Israel lobby spend $20 million to defeat them in primaries and put pro-Israel people in their place. And it worked in both cases. You know, I wanted to go back. I forgot to mention and show this, the influence that Builders for Tomorrow has, and the report that they provided to the ADL has literally influenced people who it should not be influencing, like Ilhan Omar, for example, referencing that report, now giving further credibility to Builders for Tomorrow, that non-existent entity that we talked about earlier, referencing the report that was put out by the ADL and them as something legitimate. All right. That's insane.
Yeah. And if you look at, so first of all, there's accounts like that guy Gunther that was pushing this. Then you see libs of TikTok pushing this.
Right-wing
and
narrative.
Then you see that yeah, well.
No, that libs of TikTok and Gunther are part of a right-wing narrative factory that all coordinate and push a story for the day. There's no doubt about it. Dom Lucre was involved in that and others. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I would like to reframe that, because from my perspective, it's not necessarily right-wing narrative. It's a very pro-Israel narrative.
Sure.
And libs of TikTok is almost always that way, and Gunther is that way, and a lot of these other people
that's her
that
name. She's made the trip, the pilgrimage, and by the way, these are all the people that were given the Epstein documentation that was bullshit months ago.
Yeah. Now that Dom Lucre is going to Israel, and he was invited to the White House, and is now posting about if you don't stand with Israel, then you're some racist and blah blah blah. Like, I mean, it's just insanity, right? So these people push this story on the weekend, that two of the biggest stories about the pro-Israel lobby and Israel's infiltration has broke. Number one is the story of Michael Waltz, his firing, the fact that he backed up his the fact that he was fired, the story that came out that the reason was that he was colluding with Benjamin Netanyahu against Trump on the Iran deal. Then a story comes out that on the day he was fired, that he backed up his Signal chat onto an Israeli app that backs up Signal chats, except it saves the whole chat. But it's an Israeli company called Telemessage. Then a story comes out the very next day that Israeli app Telemessage was just hacked. And then the following day, a story comes out that, oh, that Israeli app also had a huge security breach because they posted the passwords to all of their users on their website. So you have to even wonder if the hack was even a hack, or if the dude just went on their website, took the passwords and started, going into everybody's Signal chat backups and started posting them. Huge story. Second story is about Mike Lawler and the pushback that happened on the Anti-Boycott Act, which was going to, put penalties in place, and where Americans who boycotted Israel based on a campaign that aligned with a foreign entity or international entity would face $1 million fines or 20 years in prison. These are huge, huge stories. These are pro-Israel lobby paid politicians. They are backed by pro-Israel. They take money from pro-Israel. They vote pro-Israel. One was fired, for God's sakes, for colluding with Israel. And yet, on that weekend, this story, 8-year-old video clip of Ilhan Omar emerges and goes viral. Like, what is going on, right?
Distracting from narrative.
Exactly. Right. So now you've got all the right, because they use Ilhan Omar because she is a lightning rod for the right. The minute they see her, they lose their minds and they start, oh my God, look at what she just said. And she hates white people and blah, blah, blah. But you look at it and you're like, well, wait a minute. If you're somebody like me who's been looking through ADL stuff for a long time, this is exactly what the ADL says. What are you talking about? And then let's also step back and realize she is one individual in the minority party who herself is a minority within her party, not, ethnically or whatever, but I mean in terms of the position she takes.
Right. Her views are not popular within her own party. Sure.
Yeah, policies. She has zero power to do anything that's anti-white on any level. So whether she says this or not is completely irrelevant. But let's talk about who does have power, who has submitted budget requests, who has sponsored, programs to label, criticism of Zionism in our government as white supremacy, hate speech. Oh, look, it's the ADL, and they've been doing it for years.
And look,
Josh
Gottheimer, who was in talks to become a VP candidate and now is within leadership in the House. Hakeem Jeffries, they certainly are in positions of power, and guess who they're loyal to? It's not really you. We live in an Israel first country. I hate to say it, but it's absolutely fact.
Insane. The ignorance is what gets me, because it's like, guys, all you have to do is just step back and think through this a little bit. Like, she has no power, but put that aside. Who's putting this out? It's the ADL. And guess what? I posted that thing, and it was just a complete, coincidence. I posted about 5 minutes before Ilhan Omar posted her post, and I said, if you're worried about who's behind this, you need to direct your ire against the ADL, because that's who's actually pushing this stuff. But, getting all upset because of what she said, it's just, it's ridiculous. It's a stupid waste of time. And of course, 5 minutes later, I see her posting, and she's like, I got this data. It's an 8-year-old clip, and I was quoting the Anti-Defamation League, which said that there was a 78% of white supremacists were extremist-related murders or whatever, she quoted right there. And so I'm like, well, bam, there it is. I know it came from the ADL, because this is literally what I've read them talk about over and over and over. But nobody is talking about it, and that, you don't see Gunther or Libs or TikTok or any of these other accounts now come back and say, oh, well, let's talk about the ADL now, because if Ilhan Omar is such a racist bigot, then what about the ADL? Now, you'll never hear that.
No.
What you will see is in about a year, this story will resurface again, and you'll have sheep losing their minds over this again.
Yep.
And so it's just where we are.
And it's her using the ADL report at all right, is a problem for even these libs of TikTok, while they are pro-Israel, they don't like the ADL either, because the ADL has been a Democrat-aligned organization. So the fact that she's using the ADL only further punches herself in the face, because the ADL's already been discredited with a lot of people on the quote-unquote right, even the pro-Israel right, because they are aligned with the pro-Israel left. Which is, again, all of them want to murder Palestinians. None of them don't. All the pro-Israel people, they don't want a quote-unquote two-state solution. They don't want a one-state solution that's democratically and that is apolitical and that isn't religious. There's only one thing that they've advocated for, really. You know, and even the conversation about two-state solution, Netanyahu and everybody in Israel has said is a non-starter. So anyone who talks about it immediately, I have to discount, on top of the fact that their quote-unquote version of a two-state solution does not allow the Palestinians to form their own military. It doesn't allow the Palestinians to have right of passports and free travel. Like, it's not really a two-state. It's not really two states. It's still apartheid. No matter how you look at it, it's Jewish. It is Israeli supremacy. See, I just did it myself because of how they constantly conflate it. They are Israeli supremacists, 100%. You know, we also covered. They talked about the settlers, the documentary, The Settlers, on INN News and everywhere recently because of this. Louis Theroux documentary where he was literally just interviewing Israelis and Palestinians about the conflict and about the occupation and about what they experience. Issa Amro is a famous Palestinian that was interviewed, and he had the IDF and a pogrom of young Israeli settlers go to his house and try to harass him. They cut his tree down. They stole his tools, and they really just messed with him because he spoke to the BBC. That you can't even speak about what's being done to you, or they will come and harass you, take your stuff, and potentially kill you. It's unreal what they're. And again, my worry is that's what's coming here. They've already started to do it to the activists that were on the college campuses last year. They started rounding up and deporting people like Reza Ozturk, that she was, I think she might still be in an ICE detention facility. I could be wrong, but for weeks she was held because she wrote an op-ed in her school newspaper that Israel should stop bombing Gaza. And if that's what's happening now to the quote unquote, immigrant Americans, how long before they actually turn this domestically? And they've started to talk about deporting Americans, like citizens, to CCOT or elsewhere. That's wow. I mean, again, on behalf of the people who are paying them, which is Israel, for criticizing Israel. Nothing to do with America. That's so anti-American. I can't even begin off the charts. And then you've got Trump. Now, again, people think Trump was brought in because his sycophants would defend it no matter what. And so far they have. They've been right.
Yeah. But I think that there's also, there's definitely a shift happening on the right. Because politically, I cross over between, leftist ideology and then also libertarian ideology. So I have this leg in like two factions, right? Yep. So I kind of read and follow two different, groups. And what I'm noticing, at least on the libertarian side, which obviously a lot of those people also will, share, mega posts and trends and things like that. So I see it a lot. I'm noticing a big shift happening. There's definitely a splinter within mega itself that's happening in terms of, Trump's pro-Israel stance
Fell for it again.
versus America First.
Yep.
Yeah,
Fell for it
like the
again.
America First people are really starting to question, how is this America First? Like how, now obviously you've got the Christian Zionists who are probably going to be the very last holdout because, they've got this whatever religious belief that,
Their end times nonsense, right?
Yeah, yeah. But aside from that, the folks, within that umbrella that are, truly America First and were, they really had hopes that, with this presidency, that there was going to be a focus on domestic, issues, domestic rebuilding, the economy, the infrastructure, immigration, all this kind of stuff. That's where you start to see that there is a huge rift happening because those people are like, okay, it's been several months now and this is only getting worse. And this pro-Israel bullshit needs to stop. I've never seen so many comments, and a lot of them follow me. And I have never seen so many angry comments as I have in the last few weeks, where, people comment things like, I voted for him every single time and I will never vote for him, or I voted for him and now I will vote to put him in jail, or just real anger coming from the right that I had not seen prior to Trump's election. And so I think that there is an awakening happening, definitely online. I don't know how much that translates into what segment of the population is on. I really need to look at that statistic. Like what segment of the population is online versus not online in America?
Almost all of us. It's like 90% are actually online and engaged in some kind of social media. Even in the ones who say they're not, they're looking at a Facebook news feed and they're seeing corporate media pushed out to them through their news feeds, whether they like it or not. They're getting propagandized.
I'm trying to figure out, in terms of, this sort of paradigm shift that's happening, what percentage of the population that's actually affecting in the US? That's kind of, where my question is. I'm seeing this trend. How reflective of that is that? How much does that reflect?
You have an age divide, all right? Under 55, under 60. It has a tremendous impact because they're on social media much more. Once you get over the 55, 60, it starts to drop off as they watch more corporate TV and spend less time on a computer and plugged into what's actually happening versus what they're being fed by the corporate networks and the narratives that they want to push more exclusively. And that's what I saw.
Yeah.
Again, as I was down in Florida, and I was talking to people that not exclusively, but mostly still watch corporate media. They watch the 11 o'clock news and they don't watch much TV otherwise. So that's basically how they're getting their information. They're not on Facebook and Twitter for the most part. They're reading articles, but they're reading it from AOL.com or from Apple News, which of course is heavily influenced by corporate media and Zionists. Okay, everywhere that they're going for their news sources has been influenced and touched heavily and controlled and manipulated by the Israel lobby and the pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian narrative, except for social media circles, which is where the ADL is running around with their hair on fire, creating fake organizations like Builders for Tomorrow, Building for Tomorrow, in order to be able to try to control that narrative as well and influence. They claimed that they were artificially inflating certain accounts and stories that fit the pro-Israel narrative. It said it right in their name. They're not hiding what they're doing. And they're doing it either in the shadows or through our allegations, using the $150 million that the Israel lobby committed at the beginning of 2025 to shaping narrative in the United States specifically.
And that kind of it's a good, as we were kind of reaching the end here, I wanted to just touch on the ADL report real quick, since we're talking about ADL so much.
Yes.
And because I think that's kind of helps. It's a good segue to what you just said about shaping the narrative. and the information that's out there, because they're definitely using this. You see this cited on corporate media all the time. And so if you go up to, I think,
This is the beginning of this one.
oh, no. Sorry, just go back down to what you just, oh,
I was on your page, sorry.
yeah. So if
This
you
one,
go to,
right?
yes, yeah. But there should be a, yeah, that's fine. That one works. Is there a way to zoom it or no?
If I just close it, that zooms in.
There we go. We could just focus on each one separately. That's okay. So I went through the ADL data, their anti-Semitism report. They break it down into, sections and describe, what each entails. In 2023, the Jewish Currents did a wonderful audit of this data because, unfortunately, up until a few years ago, they actually would provide a link to samples of the incident reports. They no longer provide that. It's just, trust me, bro. But Jewish Currents last year specifically audited their data and had access to all of their data. And they, wrote this like scathing report where like 44% of the data was not anti-Semitism. 36 were, for 2023, 36%, which is the red column right there, was protests against Israel. Another 8% was unverifiable. It was literally the ADL saying, the incident said the date, anti-Semitic incident happened, and that was it. Like there was no data, no description, nothing. So they threw that out, and came up with 44% of this, remove it, and you're just left with the black portion of the bar graphs that I have listed there.
Right.
Yeah, and that those are
at the bottom.
The black bars, yeah. And so the red bars are all anti-Israel, criticism of Israel, protests, anti-Zionism, those type of
and then
things is
that
what they
tiny
have
little
there.
pink thing is the white supremacist anti-Israel or anti-Zionism, which they deem to be white supremacists. But the majority of it is literally just, hey, Zionism is not Judaism. That's considered anti-Semitism.
That they throw that all in there as anti-Semitism. Now, if you look at the 2023 data that I just discussed, you've got 44% of it on the top, and of course you have that gray section, which is like the unverified stuff. I was able to break that down based on the Jewish Currents audit. We don't have an audit yet for the 2024, so I don't have a portion for unverified. But regardless of that, majority, 66%, if you count the anti-Israel, anti-Zionism plus what they deem as white supremacist anti-Israel, anti-Zionism together, that's 66% of the 2024 beta.
Right,
two-thirds of it falls into that category.
9,300 incidents, 6,500 of them, 6,300 of them allegedly not.
Yes. So if you look at where it says 2024, the very next column where I put other, that's the black column, the black portion of the bar graph.
Yep.
So
3,100 out of 9,300. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's incredible difference. But what they sell is the entire bar. Oh my gosh, it's still increasing over last year. Well, in reality, it actually decreased.
Because if you just look at the others, right, if you just look at the others that aren't Israeli / whatever Zionism related, and then this is unverifiable. I don't even know. What was the unverifiable again? That's ones where it just literally was trust me, bro, with a date? Yeah.
And so that's that portion. But if you go back, so they claim that, at the end of post-October 7th, they changed their rules. And they now include a lot more anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, which is why the bar graphs exploded, right? The data exploded. However, ADL adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which makes criticism of Israel anti-Semitic in 2016. And so when you look
at that.
starting in 2017, now
You get
2017,
numbers. We get data.
Yeah, you start to get numbers. Now they included it in 2017, but they didn't break it out, which is why I don't have data there. But it's starting in 2018, they start to break it out. And if you look, every year those numbers are growing. And of course, post October 7th, they grow by a lot because there's protests everywhere, saying, hey, stop the genocide.
Right. And every one of those protests they consider to be anti-Semitic.
Yes. And do you know what else they include, Indy? Do you remember the protests that happened in front of the synagogues that were selling the illegal Palestinian property?
Of course. In Brooklyn and in Teaneck, New Jersey, and in Toronto.
And in California.
And in LA, right.
And, yeah, they include those.
Right. God forbid you protest us trying to auction off the land that we're stealing to Americans. Wow. Yes.
Okay. So, but what they do is they do not talk about what the protests were about. They just talk about that there was protests in front of them. And per civil rights law, if you have anybody posing a threat, quote unquote, to a religious institution, it's considered, it's considered hate, right? Now, you actually have to pose a threat, right? So these instances, you don't have police or FBI reports because these people weren't posing a threat. They were protesting in front of a synagogue because inside of it was a scheduled real estate.
Right, they're auctioning off Palestinian land for American only American Zionist Jews to buy. They wouldn't even allow an anti-Zionist Jew in the building who wore like a Free Palestine shirt because they might have bought the land and then gifted it back to a Palestinian.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There was an incident that happened. That's interesting. I would love to see that clip. But yeah, no, I believe it. And in Toronto, there was, an actual Jewish rabbi, along with her congregation, with pro-Palestine protesters who protested in front of it. But it was also interesting because, a anti-Zionist Jewish woman actually was able to get into one of those events and was recorded it. She was French, so the recording is in French, but she has English subtitles. But you get to have a first look, and she asked very pointed questions, and it's very clear that they are very aware that they're selling property that is stolen, is in illegal settlements, but they sell it as, oh, there's nothing to worry about. They're never going to get this land back, stuff like that. Anyway, point is, those incidents are included in ADL's report.
Right.
As is in 2017, which I thought was the most hilarious thing I read in these reports. In 2017, there was an Israeli who lives in Israel who made 150 bomb threats against Jewish community centers in the US. They included that into the anti-Semitism report. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of, same race hate being categorized as, racial hate. I mean, the guy is in the tent doing this. Clearly, he's got something wrong with him to doing what he's doing. But you cannot categorize that as racial hate, or religious hate, because he's part of the tent. Like, what is this, So it's just the report is completely bonkers, and yet no one questions it. No one asks. Even when the Jewish Current came out and did their audit, mainstream media didn't pick it up, and so it's just they're content with continuing this lie.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Well, I think that might be a good place to cut it off for now. I want to put up the slide. You know, we are completely user-funded. We're demonetized on YouTube. The best ways to support INN, if you want to see more content like this, is to help us out and contribute via Cash App, ko-fi.com, paypal.me/Indie News Network, or INNnewsletter.com. You can subscribe there monthly or annually. You can also do it at indiemediatoday.com. That's my Substack, my newsletter. I also want to let people know where they can find you and follow you as well. Let me put up your X account here so they can find you here. Is there anywhere else they can find you?
I mean, I'm mostly on here. I have a TikTok account. I use the same handle everywhere. And on Substack, and I'm actually on Truth Social, even though I hardly post on anywhere else. So mainly on X.
Okay, at Gen X Girl 1994, you can see her handle there. Follow her, support independent media and independent researchers, sponsor free media. That's really important. That we are not getting paid by anyone to say this. We are doing it because we are researching it, and we are screaming and so angry about the lying and gaslighting that's been happening in the narrative out there by the people who are getting paid to say the opposite. So somebody has to come out here and tell the truth. So that's what we're here to do. Again, Gen X Girl, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, your research, your knowledge, and sharing it with everyone. And we'll be back here again soon for another one-on-one, you can be sure. This has been INN One-on-One. I'm Indy, and thank you so much for watching Support Independent Media. Have a great night, everyone.
You can keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen? To 50,000 died, and now we know our mission. We form a militia, make Congress a prison. No, I play civil when all these dead won't make you listen. What's more American than slaying your oppressors? What's more American than liberty or death first? God, I thought we were founded on abolishing the tyranny of those who would starve a village all to live empirically. And I regret that I have only one life to give for my cause now that I can see the cause so clearly. See, I want our leaders, regardless of party, to fear me.